Katrina let me know we were all interconnected. We were all standing in the lines, whether it was for food stamps or whether it was the FEMA for free clothes or housing. We were all in the line. My name is Dr. Robin Martin. Welcome to Navigating Courage. I created Navigating Courage really and truly to understand how leaders lead. In 2005, I was in Hurricane Katrina. I lived in New Orleans and Hurricane Katrina came, and I watched the city, the federal government, state level government really not lead very well in this crisis. And in fact, they led so poorly that it started me to wonder, did they see the people or not see the people, right? Why did we not center the human beings that were disproportionately impacted by this devastating environmental crisis? So it guided me to sort of thinking about leadership more concretely. And what would happen if we focused in outside of this capitalistic structure? What if we focused in on the humans? So it led me to my dissertation. I started studying leadership more specifically and started trying to find out what leadership theories are out there that really centered humans. And in the way we think about leadership as a Western construct, there were not a lot of them. And so I stumbled upon this African philosophy called Ubuntu, which means I am because you are. And it's a humanist way of thinking about leading and being. And so I spent 4 years completing my dissertation studying leadership. And as a result, started to develop a framework to say, what would that humanistic way of leading and being look like in this new context? So that's the kind of impetus for the framework itself. But Navigating Courage was another segue in some ways. So the ideal of courage actually came further down the line. So did all my studies, thought about leadership, but the word courage didn't come to me, or courage and rage, because I separate them, didn't really come to me until I was at an international leadership conference. Facilitating this conversation, I would ask the people, what do you hope to get out of this conference? And one by one, they stood up and said, I want to learn how to be more courageous. I want to learn how to speak up. And the courage kept coming up. And I penned the word courage. But what jumped out at me was the word rage. And it started for me to start to think, I'm not sure you can be courageous without having some level of rage. It's in the word, right? And so that took me to a whole nother level of study around courage and rage, and the connection to humanity. I grew up very poor, right? So I grew up poor, but through education, I ended up working myself into middle classness in a lot of different ways. And so I was the athletic director at Dillard University. And when Katrina happened, what was so visceral for me is that in some ways I had elevated myself through education, but when Katrina hit, everybody was impacted. So it didn't matter if you had money in the bank, you didn't have access to your money in the bank. We were all displaced. Most of us were still sitting in the FEMA lines, displaced out of a city that we were unfamiliar with. We were all in the food stamp line, the FEMA line, really asking for assistance. And then leadership failed. For me, it wasn't, we think about these moments of things are happening to someone else, but when things happen to you, you widen your lens to actually see the system in of itself, because you then are a part of that system. Sometimes it's hard to see yourself as a part of a system when you feel like you're outside of it. So that's why in the framework, I talk a little bit about this ideal around being interconnected. Katrina let me know we were all interconnected. We were all standing in the lines, whether it was for food stamps or whether it was the FEMA for free clothes or housing. We were all in the line. And that understanding that we were all in the line, even despite your education, despite how much money you had, really recentered me and grounded me at an early part of my career. And started to make me understand the importance of leadership. The other side that was so visceral for me, the organizations that actually got it right, that they had strong leaders, actually the recovery was better. They recovered faster. They were organized. It was less carnage, if you will, not only in the short term, but in the long term too. And so this idea that leaders and leadership has a direct impact both on the short-term and the long-term impact of people's lives, their day-to-day, plus their families, like generational change, is what stuck with me so profoundly. And so my study of leadership was really a way to try to get at that. When did it work? And when was it successful? And when leadership didn't work? Thank you so much for watching. Hope you subscribe. See you next time.